November 2024, in The Hague, Netherlands. Inside an Europol briefing room, investigators from all across Europe listen, stunned. The FBI liaison officer who just took the floor has revealed the existence of a secret unit within the American agency called Group 78, which has been operating for months, outside any legal framework, striking directly at the heart of Russian ransomware groups. A few days later, the same scene unfolds at Eurojust, the judicial cooperation agency. European magistrates, prosecutors, investigating judges attend the same presentation, torn between disbelief and shock. They struggle to believe what they've just heard. A ghost unit within the FBI allegedly conducting clandestine operations from the United States all the way into Russian territory, right in the middle of judicial investigations carried out with major European agencies. It's the journalists from Le Monde and the German newspaper Die Zeit who uncover the behind-the-scenes details of this story and describe the methods used by the Americans to fight organized crime on a global scale. Somewhere between covert operations and total secrecy, I'm taking you inside Group 78, the FBI's ghost unit. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it around. If you want to protect your data, secure your internet connection, and maintain your privacy, I'm sharing an affiliate link to switch to Proton with a 23% discount. We don't know who created Group 78 inside the FBI. We don't know since when or what its exact political motivations are. The name of this unit made up of federal agents was completely unknown until now, and it remains highly enigmatic. Was it set up under the Biden administration, or has it existed long before? When the FBI liaison officer lays out for his European counterparts the exploits of Group 78, the shock is obvious among the French, Italian, Belgian, and German investigators, as well as the magistrates. It's not the existence of clandestine operations that surprises them. They've long known that the line between intelligence work and judicial investigations is blurring internationally, that agents infiltrate, observe, and act from the shadows. What irritates them quietly is learning that Group 78 struck at the heart of targets classified as top priority in ongoing criminal investigations at the risk of destroying years of work. If they had never suspected the unit existed, why reveal it now? Why suddenly disclose its existence, its methods, and its results? Group 78 has a single mission: hunting down Russian-speaking cybercriminal groups protected on Russian soil, pushing them to expose themselves, to leave their zone of immunity, so they end up fleeing to countries where they would finally fall within reach of international agencies. The FBI unveils its main target, the Black Basta gang. Black Basta is the name of a ransomware gang, a criminal organization that develops or rents out malware designed to encrypt a victim's systems, steal their data, and then demand a ransom both for the decryption key and to prevent the publication of the stolen files. Most of these groups operate the same way. On one side, the developers of the malicious software. On the other, the affiliates who carry out the intrusion and the plundering of the network. Among the best known is Lockbit, credited with thousands of attacks and several billions of dollars extorted in just a few years. Identified in 2022, Black Basta fits squarely into this ecosystem. Technical analyses describe it as Russian-speaking and likely based in Russia, with presumed links to former members of the Conti group. Its signature is double extortion: massive data exfiltration, followed by coordinated encryption and public blackmail. The modus operandi follows the grammar of high-end ransomware: initial access through phishing or purchase credentials, use of legitimate remote administration tools, privilege escalation, data exfiltration, then deployment of the encryption payload. Several campaigns relied on the Kakbot ecosystem before its takedown in 2023. More recently, we've seen spam, phishing, and abuses of tools like Microsoft Quick Assist to trick internal support teams. The damage is massive, and the victims are spread on both sides of the Atlantic. Estimates point to more than 520 affected organizations, including critical entities in healthcare and defense, with ransom demands reaching several million, sometimes over €1 million paid per attack, and a total haul amounting to hundreds of millions of dollars. In France, companies like Oralia, H-Tube, Unveils, DuPont Restoration, and Baccarat were hit, enough to anger specialized judicial services around the world and trigger large-scale international investigations to stop the group's rise and, if possible, bring its members to justice. Bringing them to justice, however, was clearly not part of Group 78's motivations. In the shadows of a digital war now playing out on a global scale, their actions fall directly in line with the current American doctrine on cybercrime: imposing costs on adversaries to deter them. That means dismantling infrastructures, applying economic sanctions, and carrying out defensive hacking operations conducted by Cyber Command, even if it risks alienating partners by operating outside any legal framework. A year earlier, Black Basta ran into a string of unexpected problems. In mid-December 2024, an anonymous source calling himself Mikhail contacted two cybersecurity journalists, Hakan Tanriverdi in Germany for Paper Trail Media, and Valérie Reyes-Marquivet in France for Le Maguette. Claiming to be close to the gang, the source offered to reveal more about Tramp, the leader of Black Basta. The journalists were intrigued and questioned this Mikhail's motives, suspecting he might be a front for US authorities. He only spoke during US business hours and used legal jargon unusual for a member of the Russian-speaking underworld, maybe a member of Group 78. The source eventually sent them internal gang documents containing the decisive information. The identity of Black Basta's leader, known under the alias Trump. Tracked for years by the two journalists who know the ecosystem well and have been investigating these groups, they discovered that Tramp, who had previously been involved with Revil and then Conti, other major ransomware groups, was in fact named Oleg Nefedov, an identity that had never been established publicly until then. The profile of Oleg Nefedov, aka Tramp, begins to take shape. Born in 1990, he lives the life of a ransomware golden boy. He invests in lounge bars internationally, owns several luxury cars like BMW X6s and Mercedes AMGs, and above all, he moves huge amounts of crypto, with wallets holding around 2,000 Bitcoin as of 2023. On June 21, 2024, Oleg came very close to ending up in FBI custody. That day, at 11 a.m., he was arrested in Yerevan, the capital of Armenia, while standing on American Street, a road that leads only to the US Embassy. Oleg was the subject of an Interpol red notice, and you're not going to believe this, but he miraculously escaped extradition to the United States and was released because the Armenian prosecutor failed to issue the detention order within the 72-hour legal deadline. In July 2024, Tramp reappeared online claiming that he avoided extradition thanks to very high-level support in Russia, hinting at protection from Vladimir Putin himself. Did Russian agents pressure Armenian authorities to ensure that cybercriminal Oleg Nefedov could take refuge safely in Moscow? The story doesn't say. Already declining, 2025 is shaping up to be fatal for Tramp and the members of Black Basta. On February 11, 2025, a newly created Telegram account, Exploit Whispers, dumped more than 200,000 messages from Black Basta's internal chat channels, covering the period from September 2023 to September 2024. The raw material is astounding. Operational exchanges, technical instructions, intrusion follow-ups, payment summaries, but also fragments of organizational charts, links between pseudonyms and roles, lists of victims and targets, and elements presented as corroborating the identification of Tramp as Oleg Nefedov. At the same time, Exploit Whispers dripped out information designed to sow doubt inside the gang. One claim suggested that Black Basta had run into trouble in Russia after targeting Russian banks. No independent source has confirmed this episode. However, the intended effect is obvious. Undermined confidence in Russian protection suggests that their support might be wavering, fracture the group's cohesion, and push some members to flee Russia to seek safety elsewhere, ideally within reach of international agencies. As for Mikhail, he vanished without a trace the day after the leak. It doesn't take much more to suspect that the ghost agents of Group 78 were behind all of this. They seem to have access to this information long before the meeting in The Hague, and the sequence of leaks suggests they were looking for a public vector, credible journalists capable of documenting everything, to expose the identity of Oleg Nefedov and map out the core of Black Basta. The logic is consistent with their unconventional modus operandi: create a documented public shock, then let the judicial ecosystem and international partners take over. If the FBI took care in November 2024 to brief Europol and Eurojust about the existence of Group 78 and its actions against ransomware gangs, particularly Black Basta, it wasn't out of courtesy, it was to control the narrative and raise as few questions as possible about what would follow, which we now know. Group 78 operates in a gray zone. Let's recall that the FBI, a federal domestic security agency, has no police authority outside the United States and can only act abroad through international cooperation with local authorities, certainly not to conduct clandestine operations, especially in Russia. What we do see, however, are methods at the edge of legality, carried out without judicial oversight. We can already reasonably assume a combination of infiltration and offensive hacking. The leak of Black Basta's internal communications implies unauthorized access to the gang's systems or messaging platforms, either through a human source, a recruited insider, a double agent, or via remote compromise of servers and storage spaces. In every scenario, the FBI or a partner obtained private data, namely chat histories and organizational elements, which clearly constitutes an intrusive operation preceding any disclosure. Beyond technical access, everything points to influence operations designed to destabilize the group. Using a cover identity, Mikhail, to approach the press and build a publishable narrative is a classic intelligence tactic. The entire Exploit Whisper sequence follows that same logic. releasing messages suggesting that Black Basta may have crossed a red line by targeting Russian banks with the aim of sowing doubt about the stability of its protection from Russian authorities. The intended outcome is clear: fuel internal mistrust, create the idea that even Russia is no longer a safe haven, push members into operational mistakes or into fleeing to more cooperative jurisdictions. This kind of deception and strategic disinformation is common in espionage operations. It is, however, highly unusual in traditional criminal investigations. Legally, circulating misleading information or manipulating targets would be controversial if these were acts carried out under judicial authority. Here, because the action remains clandestine, the issue relates more to the spirit of the legal frameworks than to any formal judicial oversight. What remains is the lingering shadow of physical coercion and non-digital clandestine actions. Some documents and testimonies have hinted at the use of violent or illegal methods to achieve objectives, though none of this can be confirmed. If we're talking about disruptive cyber operations, wiping criminal data, neutralizing infrastructures, we stay within the digital realm. But some European counterparts feared at one point that more forceful tactics were being considered, including opportunistic arrests carried out in hostile territory. At this stage, no solid evidence backs these hypotheses. One exchange in the leaked chats mentions the rough arrest of a Black Basta member in September 2024, followed by a release with no explanation. It is impossible to tell whether this was a botched clandestine operation linked to Group 78 or just a coincidence. In any case, the prospect of American agents committing criminal offenses abroad, kidnapping, unlawful entry, sabotage, in the name of fighting cybercrime is legally explosive. Such actions would cross into illegality under international law and very likely under US law itself, which strictly regulates the actions of federal agents outside national territory. It is reasonable to suspect that some of these lines may have already been crossed. One might argue it's a necessary evil when the targets are groups attacking hospitals, but European magistrates have been clear. They refuse to endorse such methods even if the end result is the arrest of criminals. What is certain is that European police and magistrates did not view this initiative favorably. The backlash was felt across Europe, particularly in terms of trust, because this kind of totally borderline operation can jeopardize years of investigative work. The Paris prosecutor's office acknowledged attending the meeting, being informed of the existence of Group 78, and having issued a formal protest to the relevant bodies. Opposing the FBI is not exactly easy. In terms of effectiveness, the short-term outcome of Group 78's actions against Black Basta can be seen as a tactical success. Within a few months, through indirect means, one of the biggest ransomware gangs was effectively silenced. Deprived of their tools and their anonymity, Black Basta's cybercriminals lost the initiative. This result, something years of traditional investigation had been unable to achieve, is undeniably striking. The American services have just made a thunderous entrance onto the scene, a European officer noted during the briefing. Additionally, the sheer volume of intelligence obtained through the leak is a goldmine for cybersecurity experts worldwide. The Black Basta chat leaks have allowed defenders to learn in detail how a ransomware organization functions internally, its favorite tools, its potential weaknesses, and even uncover connections between different clandestine cyber teams. In that sense, the blow struck by Group 78 also produced collateral benefits for the cybersecurity community, shedding new light on the criminal ecosystem. However, if we look at long-term and overall effectiveness, the picture becomes more nuanced. No criminals arrested. Despite the disruption of Black Basta, none of the major members of the gang have been arrested or brought to justice. As a result of the operation, Oleg Nefedov, identified as the leader, is still nowhere to be found. Several pieces of information published online suggest not only that he is still active, but that the gang has reformed in another structure under a different name, as is often the case. Leaks do not equal arrests, so we can call this a defensive success, but not a complete judicial success. Some critics have called it a Pyrrhic victory. You buy time, but the dangerous individuals are still out there. On another level, there is also the risk of dispersion or resilience. Dismantling Black Basta informally does not prevent its members from regrouping under a new banner. In fact, the history of ransomware shows very strong resilience. Groups fragment and reappear. It is entirely possible that former Black Basta members joined or formed other groups in 2025, making them harder to track. The effect of Group 78's action may therefore be temporary, forcing criminals to adapt but not to give up. We must consider the impact on international cooperation. The effectiveness of the fight against cybercrime depends heavily on trust between partners. Yet, as we've seen, Group 78 has damaged the trust some Europeans had in the Americans. In the future, this may slow down information sharing or the formation of joint teams out of fear that one partner might act unilaterally. For example, a European magistrate may hesitate to invite American participation in a task force if he fears they might conduct a parallel clandestine operation that disrupts everything. This erosion of trust would be counterproductive and would weaken the collective response to cybercrime. Ultimately, the methods used by Group 78 reopen the debate between effectiveness and cost. Yes, they can deal rapid blows to criminals, a tempting approach when hospitals are under attack. But at what legal and strategic price? As soon as a unit like Group 78 shows up, it's over for us, a European investigator confided, a sign that for practitioners on the ground, these tactics risk undermining long-term cooperation and judicial outcomes. Others, more pragmatic, admit that in the absence of alternatives, sometimes you have to cross the yellow line to break through cases paralyzed by geopolitics. At its core, the affair dangerously shifts judicial cooperation toward espionage, a gray zone that worries many. It also exposes a legal and operational vacuum into which Washington has stepped. Conducting direct disruption operations had never, until now, been openly assumed. Now the ball is in the hands of policymakers. Draw new red lines or tacitly accept these practices. The FBI refused to comment on these revelations and certainly did not confirm the existence of Group 78. It is unknown whether this unit is still active. There has been no notable official reaction from the White House or the Department of Justice. And as of today, there has been no known public hearing in Congress specifically dedicated to Group 78. Although the legality of offensive operations abroad may interest the committees responsible for FBI and intelligence oversight, one question remains: how many clandestine FBI units are operating beyond US borders? Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like and share. And remember, the error is always between the chair and the keyboard.